What does Superman, Key, and nanomachines have in common? Hi, and welcome to another episode of Lemme School Ya, where I try and not be totally wrong about everything and teach you guys some things so you can make your work with a little more skill. In today's episode we will be covering the alien element, and no, this doesn't mean that Mulder and Scully are gonna show up. They don't want to return my calls. But it means we will be dealing with something that is different, that is alien to us. Here's Ben, and I know it's kinda unfair to use such a deep and thought-provoking character in an example, but it's the best I got. Okay, so what thoughts and expectations do you have of Ben? Well, he's a person. We know he likes ice cream and pornos where girls hit each other, and he has curly hair. That's what we can see, sure, but what else do we know? Well, he's a human, right? He breathes, he has body heat. If you kill him, he dies, and every now and then he must go to the bathroom. How do we know these things when we are not seeing it? Well, it's just common sense, right? Now, let me ask you this. Can Ben fly? Until I asked this, you would not even have considered it, would you? And even now, you would assume that he can't, especially if we put him in such an exotic and exciting location such as England. So why don't we assume that Ben can fly, shoot laser beams out of his eyes, or throw trucks with one arm, and or transform into a dinosaur? The reason for this is because all these things are alien elements, because they're not common things to us. Until we establish an alien element, we are forced to assume it doesn't exist. If we return to England again, we assume that people here drink tea, called chips crisps, and can't pronounce herbs right. Until we hear otherwise, we know how England works, both with politics, its language use, its economy, where it is on the map, and all that stuff. We don't need to be told this. In other words, it uses our pre-established understanding as a basis. This is one of the many reasons why fantasy stories are exciting to make, but difficult to make all the same time. Because you will kind of have to establish everything that is an alien element, no matter how subtle or not subtle you want to do it. Hey, guess what? We're gonna use Les Lindes and some of its trashy fans as an example again, of how not to do this. Depending on how much you give a shit about my videos, you will probably have heard the name Bostainful. This chucklefuck was a particular verbal idiot who in my comments wanted to defend Les Lindes, and even posted my videos on the Catbox forums in hopes that other readers would attack me as well. He however forgot that these lovely keyboard warriors would rather talk shit within their safe borders and didn't dare say it to my face, so his plan didn't exactly work. Anyway, one of the comments this idiot left was so asinine it was downright hilarious. Mora is not a criminal, since this is Chalo's world and this real life rules may not apply. Besides, since she is loved, I'm sure her victims would drop the charges anyway. This was a response to Mora being a criminal for not only blackmailing Miles and using children as illegal workforce, but also acting as a prostitute. The worst part is that the guy actually has somewhat of a point, even despite of how god-fucking awful he worded it. We cannot be sure that the rules of the world of Les Lindes are the same as we have in our world. We can assume as much and be pretty certain that they are, but we cannot be sure until we've been told by the author. So how do we do this right? Well, I have a rule of thumb. The more attention the writer gives something, the more the reader is allowed to question it. This is why this example is so good. Because Mora herself pointed out that prostitution is illegal. As we know this is a real thing too, we can thus assume that all the rules are similar to the rules we have in the real world. We are allowed to assume something this basic, as the information we got discussing the subject is so basic as well. Introducing an alien element is an art form in itself, and there's many different ways of doing it, all depending on the story, but all of the ways are equally as important. One thing we've discussed a lot in the webcomic relief is introducing an alien element and not giving it a lot of attention. This means that it's not that big a deal for the people in the universe. But then you got superhero movies and them dedicating several minutes to showcasing their powers. Doing this means that these superpowers are as alien in universe as they are to you as an audience. After all, it's weird. Why else would they bother showing it off? You wouldn't explain the intricate details on how a toilet works to someone else either, would you? Of course not. You know them in and out, and so does everyone else. But you will highlight if the toilet has an MP3 player in it. Why? Because it's alien. In 1985, Steven Spielberg wrote and directed an episode for the TV show called Amazing Stories. The show was similar to The Twilight Zone in that it was an anthology series that featured unreal fantasy and horror stories. The episode that Steven Spielberg made was called The Mission. The episode ran for twice as long as the normal episode and featured a brave World War II gunner and an inspiring cartoonist who gets trapped in an airborne B-17 aircraft when its landing gear gets destroyed. Drama and emotion run high as the plane cannot land without the landing gear, and they are leaking fuel fast. Near the end of the episode, the plane eventually drops and heads for the ground. As the pilots are praying in what they believe are their last moments, a cartoony wheel just pops out of the plane out of nowhere, and the plane is able to land and everyone lived happily ever after.
What? What the fuck?
The episode was met by a lot of furrowed or raised eyebrows, and audience around the world said the ending ruined what was an otherwise amazing episode. Why was this? It was a mother-humping Steven Spielberg episode, written and directed by him no less, so how can it have been so bad? I mean, it had Kiefer Sutherland in it. Well, the alien element, this sudden miracle that popped out of nowhere, was never established as a possible thing, and the episode had shown us for damn near an hour a very real world in a very real situation. I mean, it doesn't get much more real than World War II. There have been no mentions of miracles similar to this prior, and so when it happened everyone is just calling out bullshit. It's like when the fully fueled oxygen-filled empty spaceship just comes out of nowhere in Final Fantasy VIII, and Squall and Rinoa are able to not only enter it but also pilot it without as much as a fucking manual. There's been no mention of an empty spaceship drifting around, no mention of the cartoonist's ability to summon a cartoon wheel out of the ether. It ceases to be an alien element and instead becomes some weird Deus Ex Machina thing. And typically, when there's Deus Ex Machina, there's laziness. This is why it is important that you establish the alien element as a thing before you use it for something, and especially for something important. Because alien elements are an exception to what we know, you also gotta be careful with what we know and what you want us to know. I had a discussion with a charming reviewer called NTG, there will be a link in the description for his videos, about Batman vs Superman. Mostly because he likes it, and I really don't. And apparently the moment you hate something, it's simply because it's popular to hate something, and I'm not allowed to have an independent thought on my own. He didn't say that, by the way, others did. Anyway, the focal point of what we discussed was Batman killing people left and right in the movie. NTG said this is because this is a Batman that has changed because of the shit he's been through prior to this movie, as shown by Robin's ruined outfit, which is a clear indicator that the Joker killed him. And believe it or not, I actually don't mind the idea of Batman killing people, but this was where the movie broke. Now, it's no secret, I don't read these comic books. Like, I personally think comics with superheroes that tries to take themselves too seriously are goofy and silly, whether it's Marvel, DC or Top Cow. But even I know, with the limited exposure I've had to Batman, that he is known for having a code where he's not allowed to kill anyone or use guns. In fact, in 1954, the Comics Code Authority was made by the Comics Magazine Association of America, which is basically a code of how comics were made. Meaning, if you were to make Superman, the dude has to be able to fly. Anyway, as this code was made, DC editor Whitney Ellsworth wrote that Batman doesn't kill. And every time Batman has killed since then, it's been kind of a big deal. Long story short, everyone and their mother when thinking of Batman knows the dude doesn't kill. And here he is killing people left and right. This is an alien element. It's not bad per se, but it is an alien element. However, it is not introduced. This is Batman's first appearance in the DC cinematic universe thing that DC is trying to push, and they don't really introduce him. They kinda assume the viewer are already aware of Batman. Even the use of Robin's costume is something you'd only understand if you have some basic knowledge of Batman. So the movie is basically telling us this is Batman, you know who it is, but at the same time changes him without telling us. And it neither tells us through the scripts, which could be done by someone going, one day Batman just went nuts and started murdering criminals. And it doesn't do it by the cinematography either, which could be done by having the camera linger on one of the people Batman kills. It gives him murdering people as much attention as someone randomly coughing. Now, time for me to stroke off Kojima a little more, because you know I have to. If you want to see someone that handles the alien element like a pro, play any Metal Gear game that is not Metal Gear 5. Metal Gear is very grounded in the real world, so much so that it has very real themes, real people, real places, and real references in it. So when something alien happens, the camera goes nuts and is like, look at this shit! And even the characters are like, what the fuck was that shit? But at the same time, the game and its storytelling has primed and conditioned the audience to dare to ask questions. And like I stated before, the more attention you give something, the more questions the audience is allowed to ask. As a result, there's an answer for fucking everything, and they are all answers with a lot of depth to them, and they are readily available with the press of a button. Final Fantasy VII actually also does this alien element stuff really well, with a few hiccups here and there. The obvious biggest alien element of the game are materia and the livestream, and so much of the game is dedicated to those things, and as a result, they are some of the stuff that is the most in-depth explained in the entire game. Chocobos and summons are equally as alien as materia and the livestream, but the game doesn't showcase how alien they are, and thus we don't need to ask questions about it. But it's showcasing a lot of materia and a lot of livestream to us, so we start asking questions, and luckily the game has answers for it for the most part. So, to sum up, the alien element are the things in your universe that doesn't correspond with the stuff the audience are expected to know. As of such, these things need to be presented and explained, and they need to be explained just as much as they're showcased. Now some homework for you guys. Go to the Webcomic Relief Discord and partner up with someone and find free movies, books, games or comics that hasn't been talked about in this episode, where they introduce an alien element either really well or really poorly, and explain to one another why you think it works or it doesn't work. This has been Lemme, here to help you make your creative work with a little more skill.